217 violent criminals. That's how many predators Donald Trump freed on January 20, 2025 with a single signature. 217 child abusers, cop attackers, and sex offenders walked out of prison because Trump needed to energize his base. One 3-year-old boy beaten so badly by his father that he couldn't sit for a week. Pardoned. One Capitol police officer, skull fractured, ribs broken, face scarred from chemical burns. His attackers pardoned. One mother killed by a drunk driver who'd just been released pardoned. Trump was warned. January 14, 2025, 4:47 p.m. His own lawyers sent him a memo. 89 defendants have prior violent felonies. 23 have domestic violence convictions. 17 have sexual offense convictions. Individual review required. Trump's response 16 minutes later. Release them all. Now. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has that email. She has the criminal histories. She has the victims in the gallery behind her watching. And she has one question that Trump absolutely cannot answer. Mr. President, was it worth it? 15 seconds of silence. His mouth opens. Nothing. His lawyer panicking. His face cycling through rage. Fear. Calculation. Every camera zoomed in. Every American watching. Then he stands up. I have nothing more to say. And he runs. Walks out of a congressional hearing. Flees accountability. Abandons the witness stand. But the evidence stays. The 217 criminals he freed stay. The victims stay. The email with it, release them all, stays. And that 15-second silence that became the sound of a presidency crumbling. The irony was exquisite. Destroyed not by Democrats he expected, but by a freshman congresswoman he dismissed as probably the dumbest person in Congress. Armed with nothing but the truth and his own words. The House Oversight Committee hearing room had never been so packed. Every seat filled. Cameras lined against the back wall like soldiers at attention. And the air hummed with anticipation so thick you could taste it. Spring sunshine filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany panels. But nobody was looking at the architecture. All eyes were on the witness table. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat at the elevated dais, perfectly composed in a navy suit that meant business. Her natural hair was styled impeccably. Her makeup flawless. Her expression unreadable. She'd waited months for this moment. Prepared for years. Really. But specifically, she'd spent the last 72 hours reviewing every document, every memo, every scrap of evidence that would turn today into something Washington would never forget. At the witness table below, former President Donald Trump slouched in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. His red tie was too long as always. His hair caught the light in that particular way that made you wonder about the engineering involved. He looked utterly unconcerned, almost bored, occasionally leaning over to whisper something to his lawyer, a nervous L-looking man in an expensive suit who kept adjusting his glasses. Behind Trump, the gallery was split down the middle like a wedding where the families hated each other. On the left, his supporters wore MAGA hats and held small American flags. On the right, protesters held signs. Justice for J6 victims and pardons should privilege. Crockett let the moment breathe. Let the tension build. She knew every camera was live. Every network was carrying this. Every social media platform was streaming. She picked up her gavel and brought it down once. Firm. Decisive. The room fell silent. This hearing will come to order, she said, her Texas accent carrying clearly through the microphone. We are gathered today for a special session of the House Oversight Committee to examine the events of January 20, 2025, specifically regarding presidential pardons granted on that date. Trump shifted in his seat, the smirk deepening. Mr. President, Crockett continued, her voice steady and professional. Thank you for appearing today. Though I note for the record that your voluntary appearance came only after a congressional subpoena was issued and subsequent negotiations with your legal counsel. Happy to be here, Trump interrupted, leaning toward his microphone. Beautiful hearing. The best hearing, though I have to say. Congresswoman, this seems like another witch hunt. How many is this now? I've lost count. He looked around the room as if expecting laughter. A few of his supporters obliged. Crockett didn't smile. Mr. President, we have questions about your January 20 pardons. Specifically the blanket clemency you granted to approximately 1/500th individuals convicted of or awaiting trial for offenses related to the January 6, 2021 attack on the United States Capitol. Pardons. Trump corrected. Beautiful pardons. The best pardons anyone's ever seen. Those people were treated very unfairly. Political persecution. Everyone knows it. We'll see about that, sir. Crockett picked up the first document from the stack in front of her. It was thick, maybe 3 in a paper. Tabs sticking out from the sides in different colors. We'll see about that. She looked up, making direct eye contact with Trump. For just a moment, his smirk faltered. Let's start, Crockett said slowly, deliberately, with someone named Matthew Huddle. Trump's lawyer immediately leaned in, whispering urgently. Trump waved him off like swatting a fly. I don't know every name, Trump said dismissively. There were many, many people. Patriots, people who loved their country, people who were protesting peacefully and got caught up in, Mr. President. Crockett interrupted, her voice sharper now. Let me ask you directly. On January 20, 2025, your first day in office for your second term, you issued an executive order pardoning approximately 1/500 individuals. Is that correct? Yes, and I'd do it again. Trump sat back, arms crossed again. Those people had been in jail for years. Years for walking through the Capitol. For protesting. Meanwhile, murderers walk free in Democrat cities. It's disgusting. You would do it again. Crockett repeated. All 500 pardons. Every single one. That's right. Even the approximately 600 who were convicted of assaulting, resisting, or impeding law enforcement officers. The room stirred. Trump's smirk tightened. Well, you know, things happened that day. It was chaotic. The officers. Look, I love the police. Nobody loves the police more than me. But a lot of things were yes or no. Mr. President, you pardoned approximately 600 people who assaulted police officers. Correct. Trump looked at his lawyer again. The lawyer nodded reluctantly. They were charged with that. Yes, Trump said carefully. But that doesn't mean 174 police officers were injured that day. Crockett said, her voice rising slightly. Broken bones, chemical burns, concussions, traumatic brain injuries. One officer lost an eye. Another lost 3 fingers. Multiple officers have committed suicide since that day due to trauma. That's terrible, Trump said quickly. Very sad, but we can't blame everyone for you pardoned the people who hurt them. Silence descended on the room like a physical weight. Trump's face began to wring. They were political prisoners. The Biden administration weaponized the Justice Department. Mr. President, Crockett's voice was calm again. Dangerously calm. You keep saying they. Let me make this specific. Let me tell you about Matthew Huddle in detail. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. Held it up so the cameras could see it was an official document. Matthew Huddle, age 42 at the time of his January 6 participation from Indiana. She began reading prior criminal history. In 2015, Mr. Huddle was convicted of battery resulting in injury to a person less than 14 years old. Specifically, she paused, looked up at Trump. He beat his 3-year-old son so severely that the child was left with bruises covering his entire backside and neck. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even some Trump supporters looked uncomfortable. The child, Crockett continued, her voice hard as iron, now could not sit properly for an entire week due to the severity of the injuries. Matthew Huddle was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for this crime. He also has multiple arrests for driving under the influence of alcohol and several other violent incidents. Trump was shaking his head. I didn't know that. They didn't tell me. On January 6, 2021, Crockett continued as if he hadn't spoken. Matthew Huddle entered the United States Capitol building illegally. He was convicted of federal crimes related to that entry. Sentenced to 6 months in federal prison. She paused. And on January 20, 2012, you granted him a full, complete, and unconditional pardon. We pardoned everyone, Trump said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. It was a blanket decision to heal the country. To bring people together. Crockett reached into her stack and pulled out another document. This is from your own Department of Justice transition team dated December 15, 2024, 1 month before you took office. She flipped to a marked page. Page 47. May I read it? Trump's lawyer put a hand on his arm. Trump jerked it away. Go ahead. Caution. Comprehensive criminal background checks reveal numerous pardon recipients have violent criminal histories, including domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, weapons charges, and drug trafficking. Recommendation: individual case-by-case review. Strongly advised to avoid political and legal liability. The room erupted, shouting from both sides. The chairman gabbled repeatedly. Order. Order in this committee. Crockett waited, patient as death, until silence returned. She looked directly at Trump. You were warned, Mr. President, in writing by your own people 1 month before you granted these pardons. Trump's face was fully red now. He reached for his water glass with a hand that shook slightly. I don't remember seeing that. Who wrote it? Probably some deep state holdover. Probably someone who wanted to sabotage. And 7 days after you pardoned Matthew Huddle, Crockett said, her voice cutting through his deflection like a knife. He was shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy in Indiana during a traffic stop. He was found to be in possession of an illegal firearm and was resisting arrest. She let that hang in the air for a 3-count. 1 week. Mr. President, you released a child abuser with a history of violence back into society. And 1 week later, he was dead after threatening law enforcement officers with a weapon. That's not my fault. Trump exploded, half rising from his seat. His lawyer grabbed his arm. I didn't make him. No. Crockett agreed quietly. But you freed him. And Matthew Huddle is just the beginning. Crockett picked up another file. This one was thicker with more tabs. Let's talk about David Daniel. Trump sat back down, breathing hard. I don't know who that is. No. Crockett opened the file. David Daniel, age 36, from Texas. She pulled out what appeared to be court documents. On January 6, 2021, he participated in the Capitol breach. Like Mr. Huddle, he was convicted and sentenced. And like Mr. Huddle, you pardoned him on January 20, 2025. Okay, Trump said wearily. But David Daniel had another case pending. Would you like to know what he was charged with? Trump said nothing. His jaw was clenched. Crockett began reading from the document. Mr. Daniel was charged with production of child pornography in violation of 18 U.S.C. Perf. 2251. Specifically, he was accused of producing pornographic images involving a prepubescent minor, a child under the age of 12. The room went completely silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. The charges, Crockett continued, her voice steady despite the horrifying nature of what she was reading, alleged that Mr. Daniel engaged in sexual acts with 2 young girls in his own family. That he created and maintained photographic images of these acts. That she paused, looked up, kept photos of the children's genitalia. A woman in the gallery made a sound like a wounded animal and was led out by security. Trump's face had gone from red to pale. That sounds terrible, Trump stammered. But I didn't pardon someone for that. We only pardoned the January 6 offenses. Actually, Crockett said, you did pardon him. Your executive order stated, and I quote, a full, complete, and unconditional pardon to all other individuals convicted of offenses related to events at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. She pulled out a copy of the executive order. Held it up. See this language? Full, complete, and unconditional. Do you know what that means legally? Mr. President? Trump looked at his lawyer. The lawyer was frantically paging through documents. It means Crockett answered her own question that you pardoned David Daniel for his January 6 conviction. But your pardon didn't touch his child pornography case because those charges were filed separately in a different court. So, David Daniel walked free from his Capitol riot conviction. But he's still facing charges for producing child sexual abuse material. Well, if there were other crimes Trump started, there were Crockett cut him off many others. And here's what disturbs me most. She pulled out yet another document. This is from the U.S. magistrate judge who reviewed the evidence against David Daniel. May I read what he wrote? She didn't wait for permission. The government's forecast of evidence is compelling and suggests defendant engaged in sexual acts with 2 young girls in his own family. It is also alleged he took and kept photos of the genitalia of the victims. The mother of one victim, defendant's ex-wife, appeared in court to request that defendant not be released. Crockett looked up. His own ex-wife begged the court to keep him in custody. And then you pardoned him for the one charge that was keeping him monitored by federal authorities. The pardon was only for January 6. Trump insisted, but he was losing control of his voice. Tell that to his victims. Crockett shot back. Tell that to those two little girls who now have to live with the fact that the President of the United States pardoned the man who abused them. That's not fair, Trump shouted. You're twisting this. We pardoned patriots who were being persecuted for loving their country. Patriots? Crockett's voice dripped with contempt. Is that what you call them? Let me tell you about another patriot you pardoned. She pulled out another file. Andrew Tate, Houston, Texas. On January 6, 2021, Mr. Tate assaulted police officers with bear ray and a metal whip. He pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. She looked up. You commuted his sentence and released him. Do you remember him? No. Let me refresh your memory about why you should. In 2016, Andrew Tate was charged in Harris County, Texas with soliciting a minor online. Specifically, he sent sexually explicit messages to someone he believed to be a 15-year-old girl. Crockett paused. It was actually an undercover law enforcement officer. Trump opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The Harris County District Attorney, Crockett continued, issued a statement after you pardoned Mr. Tate. Would you like to know what it said? She held up a printout. We are already in the process of tracking Tate down. This individual belongs behind bars. If he had other cases. Trump tried again. Mr. President, Crockett leaned forward. Do you know where Andrew Tate is right now? Because the Harris County DA doesn't. The FBI doesn't. He's in the wind. A man who assaulted police officers with chemical weapons and who solicited a child online is somewhere in America free because you released him. She stacked the 3 files on top of each other. Matthew Huddle, David Daniel, Andrew Tate, 3 men, 3 violent criminals, 3 people you freed. Trump was gripping the edge of the table. This is a witch hunt. You're cherry-picking cases to make me look bad. Crockett smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. Cherry-picking, Mr. President, I have 217 more files here. 217 pardoned individuals with prior convictions for violent crimes, sex offenses, weapons violations, and other serious felonies. Would you like me to continue? The gallery erupted again. Journalists were typing frantically. Camera operators zoomed in on Trump's face, capturing every flash of emotion that crossed it. Anger, fear, defiance, panic. Shall I continue? Crockett asked again, her voice cutting through the chaos. Trump looked at his lawyer. The lawyer shook his head slightly. But Crockett had already picked up the next file. Emily Hernandez, Crockett said, 24 years old, Missouri. On January 6, she was photographed inside the Capitol holding a piece of Speaker Nancy Pelosi's broken nameplate. She pleaded guilty, sentenced to 30 days in federal prison, which she served in 2022. Trump waved his hand dismissively. See, 30 days. Barely anything. Why was she even charged? You pardoned her on January 26, 2025. Crockett continued as if he hadn't spoken. 6 days after your blanket pardons and 9 days after you pardoned her. Emily Hernandez was sentenced in state court to 10 years in prison. For what? For killing a woman and injuring her husband in a drunk driving crash. Crockett's voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it worse. On January 5, 2022, 3 days after she was released from federal prison for her January 6 conviction, Emily Hernandez got intoxicated, drove the wrong way on Interstate 44 in Missouri, and crashed head-on into an oncoming vehicle. She pulled out photos, held them up, even from the gallery. You could see the twisted metal, the shattered glass. Jane Anderson died at the scene. She was 52 years old, mother of 3. Her husband, Michael, spent 2 months in the hospital. He'll never walk without a limp again. Crockett's eyes were hard as diamonds. And you pardoned the woman who killed her. I didn't know she was going to. Trump sputtered. That happened after. It happened because you freed her. Crockett said. And before you object, let me be clear. Emily Hernandez had a history. Multiple duels, multiple arrests, multiple warnings, and you pardoned her anyway. She didn't give him time to respond. She picked up another file. Let's talk about the Oathkeepers and Proud Boys. These aren't random individuals who got swept up in crowd mentality. These are members of organized groups, leaders, People who planned and coordinated the attack on the Capitol. Trump leaned forward. They're patriots. They were protesting a stolen election. The election wasn't stolen, Crockett said coldly. 63 lawsuits. 63 all dismissed or ruled against. Some by judges you appointed yourself. There was no widespread fraud. No stolen election. But you told your supporters there was. And they believed you. I have a right to question. You have a responsibility. Crockett cut him off. Not to lie. But let's focus on the people you freed. Stuart Rhodes, founder of the Oath Keepers, convicted of seditious conspiracy, sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. She looked up. Do you know what seditious conspiracy is, Mr. President? It's a witch hunt charge. It's what you call plotting to violently oppose the authority of the United States government. It's what you call planning to prevent the lawful transfer of presidential power through force. Crockett pulled out transcripts. Stuart Rhodes was on the phone during the attack. He was coordinating, directing his own messages recovered by the FBI talked about being ready for violence. Being ready for war. She read from a printout. We're not getting out of this without a civil war. Prepare your mind, body, and spirit. That was Stuart Rhodes, November 2020. And here's another. It's time for war. We will not stand down. December 2020. Trump shook his head. That's taken out of context. Here's some more context, Crockett said. She picked up another file. Enrique Tarrio, former chairman of the Proud Boys, convicted of seditious conspiracy, sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The longest sentence handed down for anyone involved in January 6. She paused. You pardoned him. He's a political prisoner. He plotted to overthrow the government. Crockett's voice finally rose, passion breaking through her prosecutorial calm. He organized. He planned. He coordinated with other extremist groups. And on January 6, while he wasn't even at the Capitol, because he'd been arrested 2 days earlier on other charges, his organization carried out the attack he helped plan. She pulled out more photos. Proud Boys at the front of the mob. Proud Boys breaking through police lines. Proud Boys inside the Capitol hunting for members of Congress. She held up a particularly disturbing image. This is a Proud Boy holding a police officer down while others beat him. That officer has permanent injuries. Permanent. The left calls everyone Nazis. Trump shouted. Everyone who disagrees with them is a fascist. It's ridiculous. I'm not calling them Nazis. Crockett said quietly. I'm calling them criminals. Violent criminals. Organized criminals. People who attacked police officers. People who tried to stop the certification of a democratic election. People who chanted "Hang Mike Pence" while they built the gallows outside. That was just talk, was it? Crockett pulled out another file. Dominic Padzola, Proud Boy member. He was the first rioter to breach the Capitol building. You know how he did it? He stole a police riot shield and used it to smash through a window on video. Clear as day. Smashing glass while officers tried to hold the line. She played a video on the screen behind her. The room watched in silence as a man in tactical gear repeatedly slammed a shield into a window until it shattered. Then climbed through, leading others inside. That's Dominic Padzola, Crockett said. Convicted. Sentenced to 10 years. And you commuted his sentence. Freed him. He served less than 4 years for leading the breach of the United States Capitol. Trump's face was a mask of fury. They were protesting. They had a right to protest. They had a right to protest outside. Crockett agreed. They had a right to make their voices heard. They did not have a right to break through police lines. They did not have a right to smash windows and doors. They did not have a right to hunt for members of Congress. They did not have a right to chant about hanging the vice president. She leaned forward, and you did not have the right to pardon them for doing it. The room was in chaos. The chairman gave repeatedly. But nobody was listening. Trump was on his feet shouting about witch hunts and fake news. His supporters in the gallery were chanting, "Let him speak," while protesters were chanting, "Lock him up." Security was moving in from the sides. Crockett sat perfectly still, waiting. She'd been waiting for this moment. She knew it was coming. She'd prepared for it. When the chairman finally restored order, it took 5 minutes and 3 threats to clear the gallery. Crockett picked up a single piece of paper. "Mr. President," she said, her voice cutting through the residual noise like a blade. "Please sit down. I have one more document to share." Trump remained standing, breathing hard, face red. His lawyer was tugging at his sleeve. Finally, Reluctantly, he sat. Crockett held up the paper. This is an internal White House memorandum. It is dated January 14, 2025, 6 days before you granted the blanket pardons. It is addressed to you personally from the White House counsel's office. Trump went very still. The subject line, Crockett continued, reads, significant concerns regarding blanket J6 pardons. May I read it into the record? That's privileged. Trump's lawyer jumped in. Executive privilege. Attorney-client. It was leaked to the press. Crockett said calmly. And published in full by the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Axios. So, it's already public. I'm simply reading from the public record. She didn't wait for further objection. Mr. President, she read, we strongly advise against blanket pardons for all January 6 defendants. Our review reveals approximately 600 individuals convicted of assaulting law enforcement. Additional concerns. 89 defendants have prior criminal convictions, including violent felonies. 23 have prior convictions for domestic violence. 17 have prior convictions for sexual offenses. 13 have pending charges for separate criminal matters. The gallery was silent now. Even Trump's supporters seemed stunned. Crockett continued reading. Recommendation. Individual case-by-case review required. Blanket pardons will create significant political and legal liability. We urge you to reconsider this approach. She looked up. This memo was sent to you 6 days before you granted the pardons. It was marked urgent in red at the top. She held it up again so the cameras could zoom in. Your assistant confirmed receipt. Your chief of staff confirmed you read it. I don't remember. Trump started. Crockett pulled out another document. This is an email from your assistant to the White House counsel's office dated January 14, 2025, 4:47 p.m. It says, President has reviewed memo. He says proceed with blanket pardons anyway. His exact words were, she paused, looked directly at Trump. Release them all. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even some Republicans on the committee looked shocked. That's fake. Trump exploded. They can fake anything now. Deep fakes. This is a setup. It's not fake. Crockett said calmly. We have multiple corroborating sources. We have testimony from White House staff. We have the metadata from the email server. She pulled out a thick stack of papers. We have records showing this email was backed up on the White House server. Archived according to the Presidential Records Act. And independently verified by the National Archives. Trump stood up again. This is a sham. This hearing is a disgrace. You're trying to destroy me. I'm trying to get to the truth. Crockett said, her voice never rising. The truth is, you were warned explicitly in writing by your own legal counsel. You were told that blanket pardons would free violent criminals. You were told that child abusers would walk free. You were told that sex offenders would escape federal monitoring. She picked up the memo again and you said, fuck it, release them all. Trump's lawyer was on his feet now. 2. This is outrageous. We need a recess. We need to consult. Denied. The chairman said firmly. The witness will remain seated and answer the questions. But Trump wasn't sitting down. He was pointing at Crockett. His finger shaking. You're twisting everything. Taking things out of context. We wanted to heal the country. We wanted to bring people together. Then why? Crockett asked softly. Did you ignore the advice of your own lawyers? Trump had no answer. Why? Crockett continued. Did you ignore the warnings about violent criminals? Silence. Why did you choose politics over public safety? Trump's mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is a trap. This whole thing is a trap. Crockett picked up one more document. This is a text message exchange between two of your senior advisors December 28, 2024, 1 week before your inauguration. She began reading. If we review each case individually, we'll never get through them all. The base wants results on day 1. Response. So blanket pardon. What about the violent ones? Response. We'll take the PR hit. Better than looking weak to the base. She looked up. You knew there were violent criminals. You knew there were sex offenders. You knew there were people who beat their children and attacked police officers. And you freed them anyway because it was politically convenient. The room erupted again. This time, even some of Trump's supporters looked troubled. The chairman didn't even try to restore order. He just let it play out. Trump stood there breathing hard, face purple with rage. I have nothing more to say. This hearing is a disgrace. Sit down, Mr. President. Crockett said, and there was iron in her voice. We're not done. Not even close. The chairman called a 15-minute recess. Trump stalked out of the room, surrounded by his security detail and lawyers. The gallery buzzed with conversation. Arguments breaking out. Reporters rushing to file updates. Photographers reviewing their shots of Trump's face during the memo revelation. Crockett sat at the dais, perfectly still, reviewing her notes. An aide brought her water. She sipped it slowly, eyes never leaving the documents in front of her. When the hearing resumed, Trump returned to the witness table. But something had changed. His smirk was gone. His shoulders were tight. He looked like a man who just realized he was in a trap with no exit. Mr. President, Crockett said as soon as everyone was seated, I'd like to call some witnesses to testify. People who were directly affected by your pardons. Trump's lawyer jumped up. This wasn't part of the agreed-upon format. We were told this would be questions for the president only. The rules allow for relevant testimony. The chairman said, and I'm ruling this is relevant. Proceed. Congresswoman. Crockett nodded. I call Officer Michael Gonzalez of the U.S. Capitol Police. A door at the side of the room opened. A man in a police uniform entered, walking with a pronounced limp. Even from a distance, you could see the scars on his face. One running from his temple to his jaw, another across his forehead. His left hand was in a brace. The room went quiet as he made his way to the witness table, was sworn in, and sat down. Officer Gonzalez, Crockett said gently, thank you for being here. Can you tell us what happened to you on January 6, 2022? Gonzalez's voice was rough, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. But steady. I was assigned to the West Terrace entrance. When the mob broke through the first barricade, I was part of the line trying to hold them back. Can you describe what you experienced? He took a breath. They came at us like a wave. Chemical spray, bear spray, pepper spray. We couldn't see, couldn't breathe. They were hitting us with flagpole poles, with pipes, with anything they could grab. I got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. Knocked me down. Then they just kept coming. Kicking, stomping. His voice cracked slightly. I remember someone standing on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. What were your injuries? Fractured skull, broken ribs, shattered left hand. He held up the braced hand when someone stomped on it. The scars on my face are from the chemical burns. They had to do 3 surgeries to repair the damage to my eye socket. Crockett nodded slowly. Officer Gonzalez, did your attackers face justice? Some of them. The FBI identified 3 men who specifically attacked me. All 3 were convicted. One got 6 years, one got 8, one got 5. And where are those men now? Gonzalez looked directly at Trump. Free all 3. President Trump pardoned them on January 20th. The room was absolutely silent. How did you learn about the pardons? I saw it on the news. Gonzalez's voice hardened. I was at home doing my physical therapy. I'm still in physical therapy. By the way, 4 years later, and I saw the news alert. Trump pardons all January 6 defendants. All of them, including the men who tried to kill me. How did that make you feel? Objection. Trump's lawyer shouted. Relevance. I'll allow it. The chairman said quietly. Gonzalez didn't need the question repeated. Like my service meant nothing. Like my pain meant nothing. Like the American flag on my uniform was just a costume. He looked at Trump again. I served this country for 12 years. I've protected members of Congress from both parties. I've stood in the rain and the snow and the heat doing my job. And the president pardoned the men who tried to kill me. Trump shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. One more question, Crockett said. Have you encountered any of your attackers since the pardons? Gonzalez nodded. Last month, I was at a gas station near my home. One of them was there. Recognized me. Smiled. His jaw clenched. He smiled at me. Came over. Said, no hard feelings. Right, officer? Just following the president's orders. What did you do? I left because if I'd stayed, I don't know what I would have done. He looked at Crockett. I'm not the same person I was before January 6th. The injuries, the trauma, he took a shaky breath. The knowledge that the man I attacked is walking around free while I'm still in pain every single day. Thank you, Officer Gonzalez, Crockett said softly. No further questions. Trump's lawyer declined to cross-examine. As Officer Gonzalez left the stand, limping back to his seat in the gallery, Crockett called her next witness. I called Jennifer Huddle. A woman in her 30s entered. Thin and nervous. clutching a tissue. She was sworn in and sat down, not looking at Trump at all. Huddle. Crockett said gently. You were married to Matthew Huddle. Is that correct? Yes. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Can you tell us about your son? Jennifer Huddle's eyes filled with tears. He's 9 now. He was 3 when it happened. When? What happened? When Matthew beat him. She wiped her eyes. I came home from work and found my baby in his room crying. He couldn't sit down. He was in so much pain. I took him to the emergency room and they found bruises everywhere. His backside, his neck, his back. The doctor said it was one of the worst cases of child abuse he'd seen. What happened to your husband? He was arrested, convicted, sentenced to prison. I divorced him while he was locked up. I got full custody. I thought we were safe. And then I saw the news. January 20th. Trump pardoned everyone from January 6th. I looked up Matthew's name and she choked on a sob. He was on the list. He'd been at the Capitol. I didn't even know. We'd been divorced for years by then. How did you feel? Terrified. My son was terrified. Matthew had made threats when he was in prison. Said he'd get back at me for divorcing him, for taking his son away, and now he was free. Did he contact you? He tried. Called my parents' house. Showed up at my son's school. The school had to call the police. We got a restraining order. But she wiped her eyes again. It's just paper. If he wanted to hurt us, paper wouldn't stop him. Huddle. Crockett said quietly. Your ex-husband was killed by police 1 week after his pardon. How did you feel when you learned that news? Jennifer Huddle looked up directly at Trump for the first time. Relieved. And that makes me a terrible person. But I was relieved because he can't hurt my son anymore. He can't hurt anyone anymore. She turned to face Crockett again. But for that 1 week, I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on. I kept a baseball bat by the bed. Every car that drove by. Every knock on the door. I thought it was him. My son had nightmares. He remembered what his father did to him, even though he was only 3. Thank you, Ms. Huddle. Crockett said. I'm so sorry for what you and your son endured. As Jennifer Huddle left the stand, dabbing at her eyes, even some of Trump's supporters in the gallery looked shaken. One woman was openly crying. Trump sat at the witness table, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead. Crockett called one more witness. I call Sarah Anderson, daughter of Jane Anderson. A young woman in her 20s entered. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. But there was steel in her spine. Ms. Anderson, Crockett said, your mother was killed by Emily Hernandez. Is that correct? Yes. Her voice was clear, firm. My mom was driving home from work. She was a nurse. She just finished a 12-hour shift. And Emily Hernandez, drunk, high, driving the wrong way on the highway, crashed into her head-on. What happened to your mother? She died instantly. The police said she probably didn't feel anything. But I don't know if that's true or if they just say that. Sarah's voice cracked. My dad was in the passenger seat. He survived, but he'll never walk right again. He had to retire from his job. He's in constant pain. And Emily Hernandez was convicted. Sentenced to 10 years in prison. Which wasn't enough. But it was something. It was justice. And then Sarah looked at Trump with something like hatred in her eyes. And then the president pardoned her for the Capitol riot charge 9 days before her sentencing in my mom's case. How did that affect your family? My dad had a breakdown. He'd been holding on, waiting for the trial, waiting for justice. And then he saw that Emily Hernandez had been pardoned by the president for her other crime and he just collapsed. He's in therapy now. Depression, PTSD. He can barely function. Ms. Anderson, Crockett said quietly. Do you blame the president for this? Trump's lawyer started to object. But Trump waved him off. Sarah looked directly at Trump. Yes, I blame you. Emily Hernandez killed my mother. But you gave her a presidential pardon. You told her that attacking the Capitol was okay. You told her that her crimes didn't matter. And my family is the one paying the price. Crockett let that statement hang in the air for a long moment before she spoke again. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. As Sarah Anderson left the stand, walking past Trump without looking at him, the room was silent except for muffled crying from various parts of the gallery. Crockett turned to Trump. Mr. President, she said, would you like to respond to these witnesses? Trump looked at his lawyer. The lawyer shook his head frantically. No, Trump said quietly. No comment. No comment. Crockett repeated. 3 people testified about the direct consequences of your pardons. 3 people shared their pain, their trauma, their loss, and you have no comment. Trump said nothing. Then let me show you something else. Crockett picked up a new set of documents. These were different. They had the look of internal campaign materials, slick graphics, and polling data. Mr. President, she said, let's talk about why you really granted these pardons. Trump's head snapped up. I already told you. To heal the country. To end the persecution of patriots. That's the public reason. Crockett agreed. But let me read you something from an internal campaign document dated December 10, 2024. She held up a page with graphs and charts. This is a polling memo from your campaign's internal pollsters. Trump's lawyer was on his feet. Those documents are privileged. Campaign materials are confidential. They were leaked, Crockett said calmly, by multiple sources to multiple news organizations. They're part of the public record now. She began reading. Mega base polling shows 78% support for immediate J6 pardons. Key finding base will punish lack of day 1 action. Recommendation blanket pardons on January 20 to fulfill promise and energize base for 2026 midterms. Trump was shaking his head. But Crockett continued. Risk assessment media will focus on several problematic cases. Estimated coverage. 2 into 3 news cycles. Strategy. Control narrative. Emphasize political persecution angle. Move quickly to other agenda items. She looked up. You pardoned 1.500 people, including violent criminals, because your pollsters told you it would help your poll numbers with your base. That's not Trump started. Here's another one. Crockett cut him off. This is from a strategy memo dated January 5, 2025. If PUS reviews cases individually, process could take months. Base getting impatient. Recommendation. Blanket pardon all defendants on day 1. Except short-term PR hit for long-term base loyalty. She stacked the documents. It was never about justice. It was never about healing. It was about politics. It was about your poll numbers. It was about keeping your base happy. Every president considers politics. Trump shot back. Every single one. Obama pardoned people. Clinton pardoned people. Biden pardoned his own son. Yes, Crockett agreed, but they didn't pardon child abusers. They didn't pardon cop attackers. They didn't pardon seditious conspiracy convicts. She pulled out a comparison chart. Barack Obama granted 1.27 pardons and commutations during his entire 8-year presidency. Most were for non-violent drug offenders. People serving decades for simple possession. He reviewed each case. His team spent months on each decision. Donald Trump, she continued, granted 2,500 pardons on day 1. No individual review. No consideration of criminal history. No consideration of the severity of violence. Just a blanket decision based on political polling. Trump was red-faced again. The Biden administration weaponized the Justice Department. They went after my supporters. They made January 6 into something it wasn't. What was it? Crockett asked quietly. A protest that got out of hand. A protest. Crockett picked up a tablet. Tapped it a few times. The screen behind her lit up with video footage. Let me show you what you call a protest. The video played. It was a compilation. Different angles. Different cameras. All from January 6. The crowd chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Police officers being beaten with flagpoles. Windows being smashed. People climbing the walls. The gallows outside the Capitol. Officers screaming for help on radio. Blood on the marble floors. This is a protest? Crockett asked, her voice cutting through the sounds of violence on the video. That's edited. Taken out of context. This is security camera footage. This is police body camera footage. This is footage from the rears' own phones, which they posted on social media. She paused the video on an image of Officer Gonzalez on the ground being kicked by multiple people. This is Officer Gonzalez, the man who testified here today. This is what you call a protest. Trump looked away from the screen. Mr. President, Crockett said, her voice dropping lower, more intense. 5 people died that day or shortly after. At least 4 police officers who were there have since died by suicide due to trauma. 174 officers were injured. The Capitol was breached for the first time since the War of 1812. The certification of a democratic election was delayed. Members of Congress were evacuated. The vice president was rushed to a secure location. She turned off the video. And you call it a protest that got out of hand. It was Antifa. Trump tried. It was the FBI. There were agents in the crowd. No, Crockett said flatly. Every investigation, including investigations led by Republicans, found no evidence of significant FBI presence in the crowd. No evidence of Antifa. No evidence of outside agitators. It was your supporters. People who came to Washington because you told them the election was stolen. People who believed they were fighting for you. She pulled out a printout of a Truth Social post. This is from your account. December 19th. 20 big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. We'll be wild. I was calling for a peaceful protest. Were you? Crockett picked up another document. This is from your speech on January 6th before the crowd marched to the Capitol. Would you like me to read what you said? Trump said nothing. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. She looked up. Does that sound like a call for peaceful protest? I also said peacefully. Trump protested. I said peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. But they always cut that part out. You said peacefully once. Crockett agreed. You said fight 20 times. You said the election was stolen. You said they were trying to take away the country. You told them to march to the Capitol. She paused. And they did exactly what you told them to do. I didn't tell them to break in. You told them their country was being stolen. You told them to fight. What did you think would happen? Trump had no answer. Crockett leaned forward. And now 4 years later, you pardoned all of them. Every single one, including the ones who beat police officers, including the ones with histories of violence, including the ones your own lawyers warned you about. She picked up the January 14th memo again because according to your own campaign documents, you needed to energize the base and demonstrate loyalty to supporters. That's a lie. It's your own document. Crockett held it up. Your own pollsters. Your own strategists. They told you to do it and you did it. And now you're trying to pretend it was about justice. Trump stood up. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. This is a witch hunt. This is a sham. I'm leaving. Sit down, Mr. President. The chairman said firmly. You're under subpoena. If you leave, you will be held in contempt of Congress. Trump looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded reluctantly. Trump sat back down, arms crossed, face purple with rage. Crockett waited until the room was completely silent again. Mr. President, she said quietly, I'm going to ask you a direct question. And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Trump glared at her but said nothing. Was it worth it? The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every camera was focused on Trump's face. Every reporter's pen was poised over paper. Even the protesters and supporters in the gallery seemed to be holding their breath. Was it worth it? Crockett repeated. Freeing child abusers. Freeing cop attackers. Freeing violent criminals. Was it worth the political points with your base? Trump's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. They were political prisoners. I saved thousands of families. That's not an answer. Crockett cut him off. Yes or no? Was it worth it? This is your twisting everything. Making it sound like yes or no. Mr. President. Trump looked around the room as if searching for an escape route. His lawyer was whispering urgently. But Trump wasn't listening. This question is unfair. It's a trap. It's a simple question. Crockett said. You made a decision. A decision that freed violent criminals. A decision that traumatized victims. A decision that put communities at risk. Was it worth it? Trump's face went through a series of expressions. Anger. Defiance. Fear. Calculation. I did what I thought was right at the time. That's still not an answer. Was it worth it? Yes or no? Everything I do is for the American people. Trump's voice was rising again. Everything. And if some people can't see that. Mr. President, Crockett said, her voice hard as steel. Now I want you to look at Officer Gonzalez. She pointed to where the officer sat in the gallery. I want you to look at him and tell him it was worth it. Trump glanced briefly in that direction. Then looked away. Look at him. Crockett insisted. Look at his scars. Look at his limp. Look at the brace on his hand. He can't serve as a police officer anymore because of his injuries. He's in constant pain. He has PTSD. His marriage fell apart because of the stress. And you pardoned the men who did that to him. She paused. Tell him it was worth it. Trump said nothing. Now look at Jennifer Huddle. Crockett continued, pointing to the woman in the gallery. Tell her it was worth it. Tell her that freeing her ex-husband, the man who beat her 3-year-old son so badly he couldn't sit down for a week. Tell her that was worth it for your poll numbers. Trump's jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Now look at Sarah Anderson, Crockett said, indicating the young woman. Tell her it was worth it. Tell her that pardoning Emily Hernandez, who killed her mother in a drunk driving crash. Tell her that was worth energizing your base. Silence. Mr. President, Crockett said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. All I'm asking is for you to be honest. Was it worth it? 5 seconds of silence. 10 seconds. 15. Trump's mouth opened. No words came out. He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer was staring at the table. 20 seconds. The silence was deafening. Photographers were capturing every moment. Reporters were frantically typing. Some people in the gallery were crying. Both supporters and critics unified in their discomfort with the raw exposure of this moment. 25 seconds. Mr. President, Crockett prompted. Trump shook his head slowly. This is not a fair question. Life isn't fair, sir. Officer Gonzalez learned that when he was beaten unconscious. Jennifer Huddle's son learned that when his father beat him. Sarah Anderson learned that when her mother was killed. Crockett leaned forward. So, I'm asking you one more time. Was it worth it? Trump stood up abruptly, his chair scraping back loudly. I have nothing more to say. This hearing is a disgrace. This committee is a disgrace. You're all a disgrace. So, you won't answer? Crockett said. I just did. Trump shouted. I said I have nothing more to say. This is persecution. This is a witch hunt. This is accountability. Crockett said quietly, cutting through his shouting. Something you've avoided your entire life. Trump pointed at her, his hands shaking with rage. You have no idea what it's like. The pressure, the responsibility, the attacks every single day. Attacked by the media. Attacked by Democrats. Attacked by people who are supposed to be on my side. I made a decision to help people who were suffering. People who were in jail for years for doing nothing wrong. They weren't doing nothing wrong. Crockett said. They attacked police officers. They invaded the Capitol. They tried to stop the certification of an election. They were protesting. They were rioting. That's your opinion. No. Crockett said that's what the courts decided. Hundreds of courts. Hundreds of trials. Hundreds of convictions. All upheld on appeal. Every single one. Trump was breathing hard. Face red. Sweat visible on his forehead. I'm not going to sit here and let you attack me. I'm not going to let you twist everything I've done. I pardoned those people because it was the right thing to do and I'd do it again. Would you? Crockett asked. Knowing what you know now. Knowing that Matthew Huddle was a child abuser. Knowing that David Daniel was accused of producing child pornography. Knowing that Andrew Tack solicited a minor. Knowing that Emily Hernandez killed someone while drunk driving. Knowing all of that, would you do it again? Trump stared at her, chest heaving. You're trying to trap me. I'm trying to get you to tell the truth. Would you do it again? Trump looked around the room again. Wild-eyed now. I'm done. I'm leaving. You can hold me in contempt. You can do whatever you want. But I'm done. He started toward the exit. His lawyer grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. Trump jerked free. Mr. President, the chairman called. You are still under subpoena if you leave. But Trump was already at the door. Security details scrambling to follow him. Cameras tracking his every step. Crockett sat at the dais perfectly still watching him go. Let the record show, she said into her microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos, that the president was asked directly whether his pardons were worth the consequences. He refused to answer. The door slammed behind Trump. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Within 15 minutes, the clip was everywhere. Trump walks out of hearing after refusing to answer if pardons were worth it. CNN 15 seconds of silence. The moment Trump couldn't defend his J6 pardons. MSNBC. Was it worth it? Trump flees congressional hearing rather than answer. Washington Post. Social media exploded. Trek Trump can't answer was trending within the hour. Pardoned monsters followed shortly after. Video clips of the silence of Trump's face cycling through emotions. Of him standing up and walking out. Millions of views. Tens of millions. Hundreds of millions. The conservative media tried to spin it. Fox News ran headlines about Democrat witch hunt and Crockett's theatrical attack. But even some of their commentators looked uncomfortable defending Trump's performance. Look, I support the president, one Fox analyst said on air. But that was not a good look. When you're asked a direct question and you literally can't answer it. That's a problem. On CNN, a panel discussed the legal implications. This testimony could open Trump up to civil liability. One expert said, if the victims of these pardoned criminals sue, this hearing provides evidence that he knew about their violent histories and pardoned them anyway. The New York Times ran an analysis piece. In 15 seconds of silence, Trump revealed more than hours of testimony ever could. But the most damaging coverage came from an unexpected source. Body camera footage. 3 days after the hearing, Capitol Police released additional January 6 footage that had been held back during the trials. The footage showed the attacks on officers in graphic, horrifying detail, and news organizations immediately began cross-referencing the attackers in the videos with Trump's pardon list. Every single one had been pardoned. The officer being beaten with a flagpole. Pardoned. The officer being dragged down steps and kicked. Pardoned. The officer being sprayed with chemical weapons while trying to hold a door closed. Pardoned. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Even Republicans started speaking out. Senator Susan Collins, I have serious concerns about the blanket nature of these pardons. Senator Mitt Romney, pardoning those who committed violence is a betrayal of law enforcement. Senator Lisa Murkowski, this was a mistake. A serious mistake. By the end of the week, polling showed a dramatic shift. 73% of Americans opposed the January 6 pardons, up from 58% before the hearing. 68% said Trump should apologize to victims. He wouldn't. 61% said Congress should pass legislation limiting presidential pardon power. Even 41% of Republicans expressed concern about pardoning violent offenders. Legal consequences began to mount. 3 civil lawsuits were filed within days. 1. Officer Gonzalez and 15 other injured Capitol Police officers sued Trump for emotional distress and conspiracy to obstruct justice. 2. Jennifer Huddle filed suit on behalf of her son for reckless endangerment by pardoning his abuser. 3. A class-action lawsuit representing families of January 6 defendants who reoffended after their pardons. Criminal prosecutors in multiple states announced they were reviewing cases. Federal pardons don't affect state charges. The Manhattan DA said in a press conference, "We're looking at every pardoned individual who may have violated state laws." 3 pardoned individuals were arrested for new crimes in the first 2 weeks after the hearing. Robert Palmer, pardoned for assaulting officers on January 6, was arrested for domestic violence in Maryland. Anthony Ornato, pardoned for his role as a January 6 organizer, was arrested for drunk driving in Virginia. A Proud Boy member named Pete Musico was arrested for illegal weapons possession in Michigan. Each arrest generated new headlines, new criticism, new questions about Trump's judgment. But Trump refused to back down. His Truth Social account became a firehose of defiance. Total witch hunt. Fake hearing. Crockett is a disaster. J6 pardons were the right thing. Period. They went to jail patriotic Americans for loving their country. I set them free and I do it again. The radical left hates that I keep my promises. They hate that I fight for regular Americans. Pardon stand. His supporters rallied to his defense. At a rally in Florida 3 weeks after the hearing, Trump was greeted with a standing ovation. Thank you for freeing the January 6 hostages. Someone shouted from the crowd. I do it again in a heartbeat. Trump told the crowd. Because I know what it's like to be persecuted by a corrupt system. I know what it's like to be attacked for telling the truth. And I wasn't going to let them destroy the lives of patriots. The crowd roared its approval. But outside the rally, protesters held signs with the faces of Officer Gonzalez, Jennifer Huddle's son, Sarah Anderson's mother. These are the real victims. Their signs read, "The split in America deepened." 2 completely different realities existed simultaneously. In one reality, Trump was a hero who freed political prisoners from a weaponized justice system. In another reality, Trump was a politician who freed violent criminals for political gain. The truth, as always, was documented. The criminal records were public. The court convictions were public. The warnings Trump received were public. The victims were real. The consequences were real. But in post-truth, America's even documented reality was subject to interpretation. 1 week after the hearing, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett held a press conference in her district office in Dallas. She stood at a podium. American flag behind her, surrounded by some of the victims who had testified. Officer Gonzalez stood to her left, still in uniform despite his injuries. Jennifer Huddle stood to her right, holding a photo of her son. Sarah Anderson was there, too, arms crossed, jaw set. Crockett looked tired. The week had been brutal. Endless interviews, death threats from Trump supporters, attacks on social media, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Last week, I asked former President Trump a simple question. Was it worth it? Were the political points he gained with his base worth freeing child abusers and cop attackers? He couldn't answer or wouldn't. But I think we all know why. She paused, looking at the cameras. Because the answer is no. It wasn't worth it. It will never be worth it. You don't sacrifice public safety for political gain. You don't free violent criminals to energize your base. You don't ignore warnings from your own lawyers because you're worried about poll numbers. What we witnessed last week was not just a president defending his decisions. It was a president unable to defend his decisions because some actions are indefensible. Some choices can't be justified. Some consequences can't be explained away. She gestured to the people standing with her. These are real people with real pain. Officer Gonzalez will live with his injuries for the rest of his life. Jennifer Huddle's son will carry the trauma of his abuse forever. Sarah Anderson will never get her mother back. And there are hundreds more. Hundreds of victims. Hundreds of consequences. All because one man wanted to look strong to his supporters. All because one man valued loyalty over justice. All because one man couldn't admit he was wrong. Crockett's voice hardened. President Trump was warned in writing by his own people. He was told that blanket pardons would free violent criminals. He was told that child abusers would walk free. He was told that there would be consequences. And he said, and I quote from the leaked email, "Fuck it, release them all. That's not leadership. That's not strength. That's not putting America first. That's putting yourself first. That's putting your ego first. That's putting your political survival first." She took a breath. Congress is now considering legislation to reform the presidential pardon power. We're looking at requiring individual case review for pardons involving violent crimes. We're looking at public disclosure requirements. We're looking at victims' rights provisions. But beyond the legal reforms, there's a moral question we need to ask ourselves as a country. What kind of leadership do we want? What kind of values do we want in our leaders? Are we okay with presidents who free violent criminals for political points? Are we okay with presidents who can't answer basic questions about their decisions? Are we okay with presidents who walk out of hearings rather than face accountability? Crockett's eyes were fierce now. I'm not okay with it. These people standing with me aren't okay with it. And I don't think most Americans are okay with it either. President Trump likes to say he's a fighter. That he's strong. That he never backs down. But strength isn't refusing to admit mistakes. Strength isn't walking out when questioned. Strength isn't hiding from consequences. Real strength is facing the truth. Real strength is admitting when you're wrong. Real strength is putting others before yourself. She paused, looking directly into the main camera. Mr. President, you had a chance to show real strength last week. You had a chance to acknowledge the harm your pardons caused. You had a chance to apologize to the victims. Instead, you walked out. You ran away. You proved that your ego is more important than their pain. But the truth doesn't go away just because you refuse to face it. The consequences don't disappear just because you won't acknowledge them. The victims don't stop suffering just because you won't say you're sorry. Crockett picked up a folder from the podium. I have 217 case files here. 217 pardoned individuals with violent criminal histories. 217 people who are now free because you put politics over public safety. And I'm going to make sure every single one of these stories is told. Every single victim is heard. Every single consequence is documented. You may have walked out of that hearing, Mr. President, but this conversation isn't over. This accountability isn't over. This reckoning isn't over. She closed the folder with a decisive snap. Justice demands more than silence. Victims deserve more than dismissal. America deserves more than a president who can't answer for his actions. Thank you. As Crockett stepped away from the podium, questions erupted from the press corps. But she didn't answer them. She simply stood with the victims, arm around Jennifer Huddle as the woman cried quietly. The image was everywhere within hours. Crockett and the victims united, standing strong while Trump was nowhere to be seen. 6 months after the hearing, the consequences continued to compound. The civil lawsuit filed by Officer Gonzalez and fellow officers was certified as a class action. 147 injured Capitol Police officers joined the suit. Legal experts gave it a moderate to strong chance of success. A federal judge in New York ruled that Trump could be deposed in the Jennifer Huddle case. His lawyers filed multiple motions to dismiss. All denied. The deposition was scheduled for the fall. The class action lawsuit representing families of reoffended pardoned individuals grew to include 23 families. 3 of the pardoned individuals who reoffended were charged with violent felonies. Strengthening the case's foreseeability argument, state prosecutors in Georgia, Michigan, and Arizona announced criminal investigations into several pardoned individuals for state-level charges. Federal pardons mean nothing here. The Georgia AG said if you committed crimes in Georgia, you answer to Georgia law. Congressional Democrats introduced the Presidential Pardon Accountability Act. Key provisions: individual review required for pardons involving violent felonies, public disclosure of criminal histories before pardons granted, victims' rights provisions including notification and opportunity to comment, limitations on blanket pardons for groups of more than 100 people, creation of an independent pardon review board. 3 Republican senators co-sponsored the bill. This isn't about Trump, one said. This is about preventing any president from abusing the pardon power this way. The bill passed the Senate 6,733 with significant Republican support. It passed the House 298 to K1 137. Trump vetoed it, calling it unconstitutional overreach. Congress overrode the veto 68 to 32 in the Senate and 303,132 in the House. It was only the second time in Trump's presidency that his veto had been overridden. By the 6-month mark, 17 pardoned individuals had been arrested for new crimes. 7 for domestic violence, 4 for DUI drunk driving, 3 for weapons violations, 2 for assault, 1 for attempted murder. Each arrest generated headlines. Each arrest validated Crockett's warnings. Each arrest became ammunition for Trump's critics. Conservative media tried to contextualize the numbers. 17 out of 1 to 500 is barely 1%. One Fox commentator argued that's actually a pretty good recidivism rate. But victims' advocates pushed back. 17 preventable crimes. They said 17 more victims. All because Trump couldn't be bothered to review cases individually. The 15-second silence became iconic. It was referenced in late-night comedy sketches. It appeared in campaign ads. It was analyzed in psychology classes as an example of cognitive dissonance. It was studied in law schools as evidence of consciousness of guilt. Memes proliferated. Split screen of Trump's silent face with caption, "When you realize you up but can't admit it." GIF of Trump standing up and leaving with caption, "Me avoiding responsibility like countdown timer overlaid on his face." 15 seconds that defined a presidency. Even a year later, was it worth it? Became a catchphrase used against any politician avoiding accountability. Trump never wavered. At every rally, every interview, every Truth Social post, he defended the pardons. "Best decision I ever made. Those patriots deserve to be free." The fake news wants to focus on a few bad apples. But thousands of families were reunited. Thousands. Crockett is a nasty woman. Very nasty. She ambushed me with a rigged hearing and fake documents. Total witch hunt. I do it again tomorrow. I do it 1,000 times because I keep my promises. Unlike every other politician in Washington, his base never wavered either. At rallies, when someone would shout, "Thank you for the pardons," the crowd would erupt in applause. The split between two Americas was complete. 9 months after the hearing, Officer Gonzalez announced he was retiring from the Capitol Police due to his injuries. At his retirement ceremony with Crockett in attendance, he gave a speech. "I joined the Capitol Police to serve, to protect, to uphold the oath I took to defend the Constitution. On January 6th, I did my job. I stood my ground. I protected members of Congress and I paid the price. The men who attacked me are free now. Walking around, going about their lives while I'm in constant pain. While I can't play with my kids without my hand cramping. While I can't sleep through the night without nightmares. But I want to be clear about something. I don't regret my service. I don't regret standing my ground that day. I don't regret doing my duty." He paused, looking directly at the camera. What I regret is that the President of the United States valued politics over my service. Valued his poll numbers over my pain. Valued his ego over my sacrifice. I hope he sleeps well at night. I know I don't. The speech went viral again. The wound wouldn't close. Crockett became the face of pardon reform. She appeared on every major news network. She wrote op-eds in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic. She spoke at law schools and universities. Her message was consistent. Accountability matters. Truth matters. Justice matters. And when our leaders fail to uphold these principles, we have to fight to restore them. She introduced follow-up legislation requiring annual reports on pardoned individuals, tracking recidivism rates, and providing data to inform future reform. She established a victims' advocacy fund to support those harmed by pardoned individuals. She never let it go. Never let people forget. Never let Trump escape the consequences of that one decision. But through all of it, all the legislation, all the lawsuits, all the arrests, all the continued debate, one image remained the most powerful. Donald Trump at that witness table, mouth open, unable to answer a simple question. 15 seconds of silence that spoke volumes. A man who built his brand on never backing down, never apologizing, never admitting fault, caught in a moment where he couldn't defend the indefensible. Was it worth it? He never answered, and that silence became his answer. 2 years after the hearing, history recorded its verdict. A filmmaker named Jennifer Clenny produced a documentary called The Pardoned, January 6th and the Price of Politics. It featured extensive interviews with pardoned individuals, their victims, law enforcement officers, and legal experts. The centerpiece was Officer Gonzalez's story intercut with Matthew Huddle's story intercut with the hearing footage of Trump's silence. It premiered at Sundance to a standing ovation. It won the Audience Award. It was nominated for an Academy Award. Most importantly, it reached millions of viewers who hadn't followed the story closely. Reviews called it devastating, essential viewing, and a document of American decline. Law schools studied the pardons as a case study in presidential power and its limits. Political science classes analyzed the decision as an example of base politics overriding public interest. Ethics classes used it to examine moral courage and its absence. 3 books were published. 1. The Pardon Power, From Mercy to Politics by a Harvard law professor. 2. January 6th and Its Aftermath, How Trump's Pardons Changed America by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. 3. 15 Seconds, The Silence That Defined Presidency by a presidential historian. All 3 became bestsellers. All 3 were heavily critical of Trump's decision-making process. The Presidential Pardon Accountability Act proved effective over the next 2 years. 47 pardon applications were denied after individual review revealed violent criminal histories. 23 victims provided statements that influenced pardon decisions. The Pardon Review Board rejected 12% of applications, requiring presidents to provide detailed written justifications for overriding their recommendations. Transparency increased dramatically with all pardons, including public criminal history summaries. This is what accountability looks like, Crockett said at a press conference marking the law's 2nd anniversary. Not perfect, but better. That's all we can ask. That we learn from our mistakes and do better. Jennifer Huddle's son, now 11 years old, was in therapy. He was doing better, his mother said, but the trauma remained. He still has nightmares. He still flinches when men raise their voices. But he's resilient. Kids are resilient. She paused. What isn't resilient is trust. He trusted that people in power would protect him. And then the president pardoned his abuser. That kind of betrayal doesn't heal easily. Officer Gonzalez retired and moved to a small town in Virginia. He avoided the media. His marriage had survived barely. His nightmares continued, but he found purpose in advocacy. Speaking to Police Mies about January 6th and its aftermath. People ask me if I regret being there that day. He told one class of recruits. I don't. I did my job, but I regret that my country didn't do its job in holding people accountable. That's a different kind of pain. Sarah Anderson finished law school. She specialized in victims' rights. Her first case was pro bono work for families of people killed by pardoned criminals. My mom would be proud, she said in an interview. She was always about helping people. Now I'm helping people who've been failed by the system. Just like my family was failed. 2 years later, Trump was running for president again. At his rallies, he still defended the pardons. One of my best decisions. Everyone said, don't do it, too controversial. But I did it anyway because I keep my promises. And those patriots are free because of me. The crowds still cheered. The base still believed. The split in America remained. But polling showed the pardons had cost him. Among independents, among moderate Republicans, among suburban voters, especially suburban women, the pardons were a significant negative. It's not a deal-breaker for his supporters, one analyst noted, but it's a problem with everyone else. And in a close election, problems with everyone else matter. The opposition campaign ran ads featuring Officer Gonzalez's face, Jennifer Huddle's crying, Sarah Anderson's testimony. The tagline, "When politics matters more than people." Crockett's question appeared in debate prep. Was it worth it? Opponents asked variations of it constantly. Trump never developed a good answer. I did the right thing was his stock response. But it rang hollow after Crockett had exposed the political calculations behind the decision. By the 2-year mark, the statistics were stark. 27 pardoned individuals arrested for new crimes. 1.8% recidivism rate. 4 of those new crimes involved violence. 2 resulted in deaths. 147 Capitol Police officers still in litigation against Trump. 89 families suing for harm caused by pardoned individuals. 52 state criminal cases opened against pardoned individuals. $4.7 million in civil settlements paid out not by Trump but by insurance. Estimated $23 million in ongoing legal costs. And one question that remained unanswered. Was it worth it? Trump never said, but the silence spoke volumes. Crockett's reflection. In an interview 2 years after the hearing, Crockett was asked if she thought her questioning had made a difference. I don't know, she said honestly. Trump's supporters still support him. His base is unshakable. But I hope that other people saw what I saw. A man who couldn't defend his decisions. A man who valued politics over people. A man who ran away rather than face accountability. Did it change minds? Maybe not his supporters' minds. But it documented the truth. It gave victims a voice. It forced a conversation about presidential power and its limits. That matters. And maybe, she added quietly, it showed other politicians what accountability looks like. What it means to ask hard questions. What it means to demand answers. Because at the end of the day, that's our job. Not to be popular. Not to be liked. But to hold power accountable. Especially when that power doesn't want to be held accountable. She paused, looking at the camera. 15 seconds of silence said more than hours of spin ever could. Sometimes the absence of an answer is the answer.